Hello, everybody. This is Steve Brennan, and I am joined here with Vince Mercuri. And this is another supervisor candidate interview that we're doing. Vince is running for the Republican on the Republican ticket for the at-large supervisor candidate. Before we get started, I want to start off by saying that these interviews are an opportunity for residents to hear directly from the people running for office. I have not had any prior conversations with the candidates before these interviews, and each conversation is limited to about 25 to 30 minutes and the full recording will be presented to the public in its entirety without any edits. That being said, Mr. Mercuri, tell me a little bit about yourself. How did you get here today?
All right, Steve, we'll get to that. I just first off want to thank Steve for giving me the opportunity to present and to speak with the voters and the public and the residents of West Deer Township directly about who I am and what brings me to the table. And I'm excited about that. So thanks again, Steve. And before we get started, Steve mentioned a couple little ground rules. And one of the things I learned years ago in teaching or presenting is that the participants, no matter who they are, tend to retain about 15% of the content that's presented. And so, tonight we are scheduled to go about 30 minutes. And if you do the math, 15% of 30 minutes is about 4.5 minutes. So my thinking is so that the public remembers everything that I say tonight, I'm going to talk for 4.5 minutes. And you'll remember everything that I say.
I love it.
How's that sound?
I love it.
How's that sound, Steve?
That makes my job so much easier.
That's right. That's right.
You.
But
thanks for thinking of me.
So besides showing off my math skills that I just did there for all of you, a little bit about myself. Again, as Steve said, my name is Vince Mercuri, and I'm running for the at-large supervisor position in West Deer Township. And you know what? My wife and I have been married for over 45 years, 46 coming up here very shortly. And we love West Deer. We've been here over 42 years. We've raised all three of our kids here who all graduated from Deer Lakes High School with honors and are doing well today in their adult journey. And we love this community. And the minute that we settled here in the early 1980s, we got involved. I was involved, and we've made a lifetime commitment to this community. And that's one of the main reasons that I'm running. I retired 3 years ago from the behavioral healthcare industry, and I'll talk more about that. But I decided, I wanted to give back some more. And we got involved initially with some food bank and a drug and alcohol referral center. My business is mental health and drug and alcohol counseling. I'm a certified counselor. My degrees are in that and so forth. And so I got hooked up with an organization called West Deer Tech that doesn't even exist today, but there is the food bank at East Union Church. But that was with Carol McCaskey and Chief Marty Fleshner at the time. And basically my role in it was more the drug and alcohol referral part. I was helping family members get their children or their loved ones into treatment or whatever that they needed for mental health concerns as well. So immediately we got invested in the emotional welfare and the health of West Deer Township. And we have continued to do that over the years. What I bring to the table is over 40 years experience of helping people, not only in our community, but in other communities through my job. I retired, as I said, about 3 years ago as a senior behavioral health care specialist executive. And my job was basically running a mental health crisis line and a drug and alcohol treatment center in another area of this region. And basically, throughout this time, I've continued to be involved. I've worked very closely with, I was a board member at the EMS board for years and was on that board. I've worked, even today, I continue to be involved with the Deer Lakes Backpack Initiative, which again, Carol McCaskey, where she gives backpacks to kids that meet certain criteria over the weekend so that they have food. I'm involved with that, secured some funding for them last year for that, and working on some of that right now. Uh, I am vice president of the Poppins Free Store in downtown Russellton. Work very closely with
Oh,
Sonia,
yes.
providing services to the needy in that. And so those types of, and through the years, I've been on many committees, many initiatives. I was president of the school board for a couple terms, vice president of the school board. I was on the school board for 10 years. And, in doing that, I really learned a lot about government and municipality and government and school, like millage and taxes and tens of millions of dollar budgets, which were things that I didn't know, as a young, whatever I was at that time, or early 40s. And, didn't know those things. But I learned that by being on the school board. So we've been invested in the community. We're continued. I was on the original DARE curriculum, which was a drug and alcohol prevention program that went into the schools in Deer Lakes at the time. I was on that committee. So, and I continue today. I'm on a couple other boards in the area for counseling and so forth. I was involved in establishing the pyramid drug treatment program off of 910 in the late 1900s and early 2000s. I was actually the first executive director there and literally built that program from the ground up. So my family and I have been here. We've been invested. We continue to be invested. And what I believe is that because of my executive management experience, I bring a lot to the table that can help the residents of West Deer Township.
So you mentioned a little bit, you were on, man, so much there. There's just so much there. Let's talk about your time at the EMS board. That
Yeah.
I would assume that would give you some firsthand experience of what the needs are with our emergency services. What are those needs like? What's it like to be, a fire department or an EMS
Right.
in a municipality such as ours? What are the needs of those types of organizations?
Yeah, that's a great question, Steve. I did learn about this, and not only during my time on the board at EMS, but even when I was managing the mental health crisis line, worked very closely with the police departments, worked very closely with all the first responders, and one of the biggest needs, particularly with EMS, and this is something dear to my heart, and I'll be talking a little bit about the opiate issues in the region, is that funding. One of the things that happens, and some of this has been addressed. But one of the biggest issues is if there's an overdose and EMS goes to the scene and the person who had overdosed isn't taken to the hospital, it's very difficult to get paid for that. Okay.
Hmm.
And there's a term called, even though it's a little bit insensitive, but there's a called pack and ship in the EMS
Hmm.
business. And if they don't transport that client, they can't bill for the call that they just made. That has been a big issue. Now it's changed a little bit over the time, but that's a big issue. Funding is a huge issue for EMS because of the disproportionate funding that goes with it through the insurance companies. Their costs don't get met a lot of times based on the services that they're providing. So I am a big proponent. I know that this current Board of Supervisors bought an ambulance in the last year for the
Yes, sir.
EMS department. I applaud that because they need those types of resources. Same thing for the fire companies. They're very strapped financially. I know there was the tax that was passed a few years ago, but they need so much more than that. So I am a big proponent to making sure that the health, safety, and welfare of those organizations continues through the various funding mechanisms. And anything that we can do to help, they get some very low interest loans. Any way that the township can help to support that, work with the elected officials to make sure that they can get those funding streams supported for them, I would be all for that.
Let's talk a little bit about growth and development in West Deer. I saw a quote. Actually, I saw you say it. You mentioned that you saw a quote online and where somebody was, on social media, and they said, be careful who you vote for supervisor because they're going to raise your taxes, and they're just going to keep building. And you responded to that. I thought it was interesting. You said, well, we will raise taxes if we don't have responsible or smart development. What does that mean?
Well, I think it means, I think about being a supervisor, and this is where my past experience as an executive for 40 years comes into play. I think it's all about oversight and accountability with a vision. My job as a supervisor, if elected, is to provide oversight for these developers and to provide accountability for these developers, the agreement, that they're going to pave the roads and they're going to do water testing samples and those types of things. And so I think that oversight and accountability is a key factor in being a supervisor. And again, I've done that. I did that was when I was on the school board. I did that in my job for all those years. And what I mean by smart development is making sure that developers are abiding by the ordinances, making sure that the people's needs are met, making sure that they're vetted, making sure who we're dealing with. I think sometimes when we see these developers, and I'm all for the development, but I think we need to be a little careful. There's a lot of development going on right now, proposed. Not all of it's been approved yet. And I'm for that development. But when I hear certain things, I think, ooh, how many senior citizen pads do we need in this township? The good news of that is it does bring in the tax revenue and it doesn't bring in the students to the school. So that's kind of a win-win for the township. But we have to make sure that those developers are abiding by the stormwater management systems that we have. Need to make sure that they have the appropriate fencing, need to make sure that they have the appropriate infrastructure. That's where the oversight and accountability come into play. We just can't accept the fact that they're going to do a good job. We need to hold them accountable to do a good job by asking the right questions. And that's one of the key things I learned about being on the school board all those years was how to ask questions to developers. Like in my jobs, both at the Pyramid site and the site in Indiana, PA, where I was managing that program, I was in charge of facilities management. So day to day, I was in charge of the development, the infrastructure, how we were going to do different builds out. So I've worked with engineers, I've worked with construction managers to make sure that they're staying on budget, they're not putting in cheap materials. That's what I mean by smart development. That we hold people accountable, and at some point, where we can, legally, we put a hold on it if it's becoming too much for the township to handle. Because the biggest challenge, and I know that's one of the questions down the road, but the biggest challenge in West Deer Township, and I hear this talking to voters, Steve, right now. How do we do this development and maintain our rural image? The reason we love West Deer is that we have that rural image. It's a safe community. There's not a lot of crime. We have a police department that is ranked every year in the top across the state.
That's
right?
true. That's absolutely
we also
true.
we also have a community that cut the township taxes last year by 0.09 of a mil. Probably one of the only townships around that cut taxes when most of the other townships around are increasing taxes right now. They're increasing taxes and they're cutting services. You read the paper or you listen to online, a lot of Jeanette and areas like that, they've lost their EMS services. Some places are losing, having to cut back on some of their fire company recruits. They're not getting recruits. It's very hard to get recruits right now. So that's what I mean by smart development, that we hold people accountable.
How do we manage that balance between maintaining our rural identity and encouraging development in our area, like selling kind of West Deer as a place that is friendly to business?
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm on the Deer Lakes Revitalization Committee. It's a committee that was formed about a year or so ago, and several of the candidates are on that. And that's the big thing that we're trying to navigate. We have identified 3 sites or 3 areas for development. One is downtown Russellton. We've got to do something. There are grants out there. There's the Main Street Matters grant that can help us get some lighting and sidewalk. And I've talked to merchants, and I have had merchants say to me, why should I invest down here if I'm going to get flooded? I think the last flood was 2005, 2006.
And they've had flooding since then.
Yes, but I think the main one was then that cost the folks on there. And so one of the things I have proposed, and I've actually talked to some people about this, let's dredge the creek. like they did on Route 8 to stop the flooding on Route 8. They brought in the Army Corps of Engineers and they dreaded the creek. Let's dredge Deer Creek. Let's dredge it so that it's safe for the merchants. Because I had a young merchant say to me, why should I invest down here when I could be my carpets, my walls, and everything else? The other day I was down there, the dentist, and Dr. Graham was showing me the high water mark of the flood of 2005 and how bad that was. So anyway, so to get back to the question, so we've identified Russellton area, we've identified the 910 corridor for development, and we also have met with the people up at the MSA, the Old Rock Airport site, and that those three sites could be areas that we can try to recruit some business. But your question is, how do we manage it? I think we need to manage it by having a strategic plan. I do know that the township is putting together their vision and their plan, and I applaud that. I have always used strategic planning in my management style. There's a thing called a SWOT analysis. You want to identify the organization's strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats. And so I think the first thing is to begin to identify where are the areas that we can develop. I just identified 3 of those areas for you. There could be others, right? Sure. And then how do we monitor that and limit that? Because we need the tax dollars. Like you started off with your question that I said earlier at another point. If we don't have development, there is going to be tax increases or service cuts. Sure. And again, when I'm out there talking to voters right now, the number one thing they say to me is, don't raise our taxes. And when I say to them, your taxes were cut last year, they go, oh, thanks. I said, well, it wasn't me. It was the current supervisors, right? Right. But so I think that, we need to have continue to evolve a strategic plan that says, these are the areas, these are the kind of neighbors we want to have, because you can just start chasing the dollar. You can start just chasing the dollar and selling your soul for development. That's not a good idea. We want to maintain our area. We may have to say no, and it may be contested and legally you might lose it depending on what you're saying no about. But Sure. We're going to have to be able, again, I think it comes back to that accountability and oversight.
Is there such a thing as too many 55 and over development plans?
Well, I don't know. I just use that as an example after sitting in on the planning commissions.
I hear it all the time, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when you're my age, there's not too many of them, right? But when
I'm not that far behind you.
It's a good question. What I want to look at is, what do other communities that are our size have? How many of these do they have? Because it does look like a win-win. You're getting the tax dollars,
it sure does.
And you're not getting the students in the school. So I would say that, again, as long as it fits in with the plan that you're going to develop, to have a specific plan. This is what we're trying to do in West Deer Township. And again, I know that the current board is putting together and been working on a strategic vision and plan. And just within that, try to set some benchmarks.
Yeah.
Try to set some standards of what you want to do, because I certainly don't believe that we should just drop everything and roll over whatever these developer wants we're going to do. No, we need to watch guard for the citizens what we're going to do. We need to make sure that our communities are safe and they're adequate and they meet the needs of the public.
So, I mean, and it affects the infrastructure, roads, and everything else in the township. But what would you say to somebody that went up to you and said, what is a guy with a degree in education and a background in substance abuse, psychology, what do they know about infrastructure? What would you say to a person like that?
Yeah. Well, I'd say it's a good question. And I would say that what I said here this evening is that I've been very involved in that. In my jobs, I was in charge of the actual infrastructure, the building of Ridgeview down on 910. I actually was part of it from the ground up. I worked with the developers. We designed the building. The building. We made sure that the parking lot had what it needed. And so I have, in my management career, and even at the drug treatment center, I had in my most current job before I retired, my job was the infrastructure. So I know about gravel, and I know about the parking lots, and I know about the plumbings. I did blueprints. I'm a good student, and I'll study that. One of the things I did, not to get into the whole fracking thing, but I contacted Olympus at the time, and I walked all of the sites in West Deer Township. I spent an entire day with their leadership, looking at their manuals, looking at their stormwater management plans, looking at exactly I did 5 different, so I even did some outside of West Deer Township, so that I saw every level of construction so that I knew about it. Did I know about it before then? No. But I made sure I got out there and learned about that. And with and I think the most important thing is I know people. And 2/3 of what you do in any business is dealing with people. And I know how to communicate with them, and I know how to deal with them and make the hard decisions, because that's part of what I've just learned in my life in being a manager.
And I would think, dealing with people, I mean, you need to be a good people person, I would think, to be a township supervisor, because you're dealing
Yep.
with constituents that maybe half of them disagree with everything that you want to do.
Sure.
And you're even going to have some divisiveness perhaps on the board.
Sure.
How does somebody with your experience, how does your experience tell you how to deal with uh, in leadership with differing opinions, but even on your own board as well as with
Right.
your constituents?
Yeah, it's a great, and I've dealt with that many, many times. Um, First off, is I have learned how to disagree without being disagreeable. I'm not going to take it personal. I'm not going to make it personal. You know, we're I don't know what, 6 months into this campaign, 6 weeks out from the actual election,
Yep.
and as we sit here today, I pledged at that debate in April down at number 3 Fire Hall that you would never hear a negative word about my opponent come out of my mouth. And to this day, that is still the case. And I won't do it. Okay. Because I believe I'm running on my credentials. And so I have learned how to disagree without becoming disagreeable. And the other thing is, and this goes back to my schooling and my background, I know how to listen, and I know how to communicate in such a way. I always look at the fact that every interaction I have, even this interaction with us tonight, Steve, it's either a construction project or a demolition project. And my words dictate that. How I talk to you, how I talk to the people can either build them up or bring them down. So when I'm having disagreements on a board, you can guarantee that I'm going to be respectful. I'm going to hear people out. I'm going to validate their concerns. I'm going to hear what they're saying, because I don't have all the answers and nobody has all the answers. So I need the input of the citizens, and I need the input of fellow board members to be able to make an informed choice, to be able to make a decision, because people have different skill sets and they have different knowledge bases. You can't have it all, you know? And so I would take that skill set of knowing how to listen, knowing how to talk to people, and knowing how to disagree and say the hard things. I mean, I managed 40 to 50 people every day for 40 years. I've dealt with a lot of conflict in my life with dealing with that. The school board, lots of division, lots of conflict. But I never once, and I'm not saying I haven't made a mistake, but I never once would be disrespectful or belittle somebody about their viewpoint. We need diverse viewpoints to make well-rounded decisions so that we can help the citizens of West Deer Township.
That's a great point. And listening, I would think, tell me if you agree with this, but maybe listening also, maybe there's something you missed, and just by being
Correct.
a good listener, maybe you're able to take that in and learn something yourself.
Correct. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. That when I talk to, even when I'm going out and talking to voters, they're talking to me about all kind of things going on. Some of them don't have anything to do with being a supervisor, but I'm listening to what they say. I'm listening to their viewpoints, because again, I'm coming from my viewpoint, from my experiences, my upbringing, my culture, whatever it might be. So I need and I value people around me that are going to say and challenge appropriately. I don't think we should be disrespectful. I was talking to a voter the other day, and she started to be very insultive and call names and things like that. And I said, ma'am, I hear what you're saying. I understand your frustrations, but I'm not going to stand here and be insulted repeatedly. A few times I says, and I'd already spent 15 minutes talking to her. I said, you have a great day. I'm sorry that you're upset. She was upset about America and things going on, and legitimate concerns. But calling names never changes anything.
Did she want you to help with the immigration crisis or something like that?
Right. Yeah. People don't.
These are not things that you have to solve.
Yeah. No. I got asked the question the other day: are you for banning books? And I'm like, wait, this is the supervisors. We're not banning books. That's a school board issue, and it's really not an issue in West Deer or Deer Lakes that I've heard. It's more another community. But so I think listening is key, and being able to disagree and still part somewhat of friends. At least acquaintances.
That's perfectly fair. Well, I want to give you the last word here to send us off with. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, and a very interesting background. I hope that at some point we get to talk about it again. Once all of these, elections and whatnot are behind us, we'll chat at some point in the future. Why don't you send us off? Tell us why you are the vote that West Deer needs.
Well, you know what? I bring a lot of uniqueness to the table. For all of my 40 years in this community, I've cared about the emotional infrastructure of people, getting them the help that they need, counseling them, getting curriculums in the school, and making sure they're fed through the food banks, all those kind of things that I've already referenced as we were talking. But now I want to get more involved, and I want to be involved in the actual infrastructure, not only the emotional, but also the physical infrastructure. For example, one of the things I think is important to think about is that, I can bring a history of being able to deal with people in a way that makes them feel good about themselves and the community and the township. So one of the things when I first designed my brochure coming up for the election, I had to think about what were the 4 points that I really wanted people to know about Vince Mercuri. Who am I in my soul? Who am I in my heart? And on the front of my literature, I have servant leadership. And that's something I've always valued. I will be your servant. I will work for the township of West Deer Township. I work for you as the taxpayer. The other thing I said was proven experience. I've talked a lot about the experience tonight. I've negotiated contracts with unions. Right? I've managed personnel for 40 years. The third thing I listed was fiscal prudence. I will manage the budget in West Deer Township like it's my own checkbook. I will make sure that we're spending the taxpayers' dollars, wisely and efficiently. And they have been now. There's actually a very healthy fund balance. And as I mentioned, the taxes were cut, but no tax increase under my watch. And the third point and the fourth point is steadfast integrity. I may make mistakes, but I won't mislead you. I won't lie to you. I'll treat you with dignity and respect because that's the way I want to be treated. So if you decide to vote for me as your supervisor, I guarantee you that I will work hard. I will be diligent. I will be prudent fiscally, and I will try my best to listen to your concerns. And then once hearing all of the input from the lawyers, from the architects, from whoever, try to make a decision that is in the best interest of the citizens of West Deer Township. I thank you, and I would ask for your vote on November 4th, or if you're doing the early voting before then, which will begin early October. Again, Steve, thank you so much for this time. I've enjoyed it, and
my pleasure.
Thank you
for taking the time with us. Ladies and gentlemen, Vince Mercuri. Take care, Vince. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Thank you out there. Thank you.